I went from a fat kid in middle school to now having a 40-inch vertical and fulfilling one of my lifelong bucket list endeavors, no pun intended, of dunking a basketball. And I'll be honest, increasing my vertical was easy. If you ever decide to increase your performance in any way, you will also come to find that getting faster, jumping higher, training to be more explosive, all these things are the easy part. Then, like what happened to me, reality will hit and you'll realize that although increasing performance is easy, the hard part is staying healthy. If you've ever played a sport that involves a lot of jumping, you'll know all too well the seemingly endless battle with knee pain. So in this video, I'm gonna give you 3 steps that have helped me in my fight against knee pain while continuing to pursue athletic longevity. Step number 1 is make sure you're actually fighting the right fight. Now, I'm not a doctor or a physical therapist, and so my goal is to simply share my experience and not to diagnose. From what I've observed after training myself and 10 years of coaching other individuals is that the treatment for jumper's knee, aka patella tendonitis, is different than the treatment for patella femoral pain, which is often called runner's knee, but it's just a fancy way of saying general front of the knee pain. I was talking to this guy in the DMs on Instagram and he mentioned that he had jumper's knee. So I asked him what activity specifically aggravated the issue. He told me that long bike rides were very problematic. And this was indicative to me that he in fact was not dealing with jumper's knee, because the only type of person that's going to be dealing with jumper's knee is going to be someone that is jumping high off the ground and is jumping a lot. So if your patella area on the front of your knee hurts from squatting or running or biking or other things of that nature, and they aren't brought about by exclusively through jumping, then that's a pretty good chance that you're dealing with patella femoral pain and not patella tendonitis. As I said, this is important because the protocols that you use to address the two are very different. This brings us to step number 2, which is train the brain out of pain. Tendonitis is a fancy term for tendon inflammation. Tendinosis is a chronic inflammation of the tendon, but we often use tendonitis and tendinosis interchangeably. The reality is if you are dealing with knee pain for a while, then you more than likely have a chronic or tendinosis of the tendon. If you wanted to prevent the chronic issue, you would have had to stop all activity right away when you started to feel the slight discomfort in your knee after that game of basketball or whatever. Let's be real, nobody does that. They play for hours the next day, or they push through the pain until months go by and the issue just gets worse and worse until it becomes unbearable. And most of you are in this stage of the process. You've ignored the signs because it wasn't really impacting your performance at the time, but now it's a massive issue and it's preventing you from not only playing sports, but doing other mundane tasks, like your knee starts to ache after sitting for too long or driving, or it's just nearly impossible to walk down stairs normally. So you've moved from tendonitis to tendinosis, and now your brain has perpetually mapped out that area as a painful area. What's worse is that it starts avoiding the muscles and the movements around that area, namely the quad starts to turn off and weaken. So before we can start to implement any active measures like strength training or loading the tissue, we need to get the brain prepared to heal, since you've essentially desensitized the healing process for so long. The way you do that is, first, you need to offload or stop doing the activity that hurts. If jumping hurts, you may need to stop jumping so much, or in more serious cases, you might need to stop jumping altogether for a time. Second, you need to track your pain scores. Every day, you need to keep a day before training pain score. You need to keep a during training pain score, a post training pain score, and a day after training pain score. Everything you do should keep your knee at a 0 to 2 out of 10 in pain, and you should gradually start to trend down in pain over time. The day after pain score is the most telltale sign of if you overdid it the day before or not. By the way, the timeline for the healing process is very unique. You may have to only offload for a week or 2, but some of you might have to step away from the painful activity for even longer than that. And it's sometimes said that however long you chose to neglect listening to your body, that's the duration it'll take for you to heal. So if you have been perpetuating this issue for 2 months, it might take you 2 months to get back to normal. But either way, don't create timeline expectations. Use the pain scores to track data and listen to your body and use that as your timeline. Your recovery duration will also be significantly impacted by your sleep, your nutrition, and other lifestyle habits. But no matter what, make sure that you're still training in general as much as you're able to throughout the recovery process. Offloading from jumping is no excuse to be a lazy bum and skip out on other aspects of your training. Here's a special tip I learned from Jake Tura about how to ensure that you don't completely lose all performance gains like speed while you're recovering. You're going to want to do low impact sprinting. Find a nice grassy field to reduce impact and then jog into the sprints instead of starting in like a 3-point stance and doing acceleration. And then to slow down by gradually reducing your speed instead of abruptly stopping. This will make sure that you don't get into those deep angles that might irritate the knee or place too much pressure on the quad as you're rapidly trying to slow down, which can also potentially irritate the knee. On to step 3, which is blood flow and load are tendons' best friends. First time I had jumper's knee, I stopped jumping and playing basketball completely for almost 2 months. And this is a very similar circumstance that has happened with a lot of the students I've had and a lot of the people I've talked to. And I thought that rest was the answer. Then lo and behold, the first time back on the court, my knee pain was back and it was worse than before. Then I realized that rest is rust. Tendons are known for having very poor blood flow, which makes it more challenging for them to heal, and it makes the timeline longer for them to heal. The first thing you need to implement in your training is blood flow, and more specifically, blood flow around the knee. In the beginning stages, doing just some basic movement and compression might be all that your body can handle. But as quickly as you can tolerate it, you're going to want to start to incorporate some type of load. The best form of loading for tendons is going to be isometrics and heavy eccentrics. My favorite isometric is simply a knee extension isometric. You can literally do it anywhere. I'll show you right here. Just wrap your hand like this, and then you're just going to push against your hand with your shin and hold it there for 5 sets of 45 seconds. And you can do this 2 or 3 times a day. Just wait about 6 hours in between the next time that you do it. There are many other different isometric exercises that you can perform for the knee, but either way, just make sure that you find a stimulus that gets the quad working, loads the tissue, gets blood flow to the area, and makes your knee feel better after the 4th or 5th set. First few sets, you might have a 1 to 2 out of pain, but by the end of the sets, you should be able to really push it and feel that burn in the quad. Once your knee starts to feel better from offloading, blood flow, and isometrics, which should be about a week or 2, you can start doing slow, heavy eccentrics and adding some light jumping back into your training. But it is so crucial to continue to track your pain scores and stay consistent with your daily isometrics. I also recommend always doing isometrics before any heavy eccentric strength work to ensure that the quad is firing properly. You can also combine blood flow with resistance training by utilizing floss bands while you're doing the resistance training. This will train the brain out of pain, promote blood flow, and load the tissue all at the same time. But once you start to introduce the strength work on a regular basis, you'll start to notice improvements and positive trends in your knee. Then you can gradually start to continue to reintroduce jumping at low levels of volume, and then eventually, when I say eventually, I mean like it may take several months, but eventually you can gradually start to work back in jumping and training as normal without any problems. But as always, be aware of random spikes in volume and intensity that may irritate the knee. Continue to do the isometrics and heavy eccentrics in your training and listen to your body. So those are the 3 steps. Now, as a few side notes, as I previously said, patellofemoral pain doesn't respond well to the same methods, specifically isometrics, which tend to actually make the issue worse. So for general front of the knee pain, that is not patella tendonitis, you can still follow the principles of offloading and gradually loading, but with patellofemoral pain, it doesn't trend in pain as nicely and progressively as patella tendonitis pain. So you really have to be diligent to track your pain scores and make sure that you are very aware of how your body is progressing and ensuring that you don't overdo it, especially with the patellofemoral pain. And the last tip is just remember that it's a long game. It might seem like the end of the world to stop jumping for a little bit or step away from your sport for a time, but you have to be in it for the long haul. And in the grand scheme of things, if you want to continue continue to pursue athletic longevity, you have to learn that with the calm comes the storm, and with everything good, there comes adversity. It's completely normal to have these issues, especially if you're not willing to settle for average athletically. So see this as an opportunity to improve rather than an obstacle. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to join my community where I teach competitive, family-oriented dudes how to train for athletic longevity. And that's all. Bada bing, bada boom.